close to 80 who said they would be in attendance. I'm so thrilled to have Mr. Dan Hartman here with us today. So welcome to our Leadership Speaker Series. Dan has been at Glensheen and is now taking the reins at the DECC. So it'll be awesome to hear that journey. Welcome to our session. The event is sponsored by the Sandbulte Center for Ethical Leadership here at the College of St. Scholastica. The center was created, just for some background for those of you who might not know, through a special gift from Minnesota Power to honor retiring chairman and CEO, Mr. Sandy Sandbulte, who is here with us today. So thank you for being here too, Sandy. Welcome to our students and our staff and faculty here. All excited to hear what you have to say. I see Dr. Bruce Stender here as well, and Tom. And President McDonald might join us as well. It's an absolute honor to introduce our speaker today. Mr. Hartman, like I said, is the executive director at the DECC. He served as the director of Glensheen Mansion for 8 years. And during that tenure, I feel like I've experienced firsthand just an amazing experience with your rebranding of the museum and the increased visitorship that you brought to that property. And just a great gem in the community. So thank you for all of that work. Really interesting fact that I've shared with a lot of the students, as a UMD senior, you led a student campaign to build the DECC's Amsoil Arena. So that's a pretty cool story. I know a lot of students are very excited about that. And not only that, but you did serve on the Duluth City Council from 2010 to 2014. Welcome, Dan. I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you. I'll just say it's been an honor to be asked to do this. I always debate whether I should do PowerPoints or not. So,
3 weeks away.
Can you guys hear me okay?
And then we have advisement.
Oh, we just lost you, Dan.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, good. So Melissa was kind enough to give me a list of questions, and I'm going to slowly try to go through that list of questions. I will say at the end of this, though, it's a free-for-all. Feel free to ask me questions on any of the things that happened or not. So I think that's what's kind of fun about this. But I will say I don't think I've ever been asked this type of series of questions, and so it's kind of a fun list. I will also say, as some of my staff will tell you, I'm not someone who likes to talk about my own life a lot. So we'll see how this goes. So I'm originally from Crosby, Ironton. I joke that I'm from the South Range because whenever I tell the Rangers that I'm from Crosby, they're like, that's not the real range. But my team growing up was literally called the Rangers. So I feel like we should at least be considered part of the range. But yeah, I grew up in Crosby, and growing up, my parents owned a movie store. They owned a Radio Shack. My dad was a professional videographer. One of his things that he loves to talk about is that he was hired to do court deposition videography. And so when the giant tobacco case in Minnesota was settled, he was the one at the courtroom actually filming the court case. So he had to go to Carolinas and see the tobacco companies and all of that. And so he's traveled, when I was growing up, he traveled all over the world filming these court depositions from Japan to South America. And I bring that up because I think that left a lasting impression on me of travel and the importance of, I would say, hospitality. And because, every time he'd come back from these world travels, he'd bring gifts and tell stories of these experiences. And that was definitely something that left an impression on me. On the other hand, my mom helped run these different stores, but she also ran her own party balloon party store. And so I have this other weird background I never talk about a lot, but I was that kid who had to help her make balloon arches all the time as like a 6-year-old. And so I have this weird events party background because of my mom. And my mom was the financial kind of backer of all of my dad's random businesses too. And so I kind of grew up under the umbrella of some serial entrepreneurs. And if you know me at all, you know I got a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, and that definitely comes from my parents. And I think growing up in a small town of Crosby, there was a lot of support for that. And when I first decided to go to University of Minnesota Duluth here in Duluth, I came as a marketing major, and I was all in on that. And so I think for some Duluthians, they know of me as like the Glensheen history guy. But if you get to know me, I'm probably more of a marketing person than I am a history person. And that to this day, I think is probably why I was successful at Glensheen. But I'll get to that later. So at UMD, and I think this has been part of what I talked about before, but I had critically made fun of some things that were happening at UMD of like, why is UMD doing this? Why is UMD doing this? And my friend at the time, Melissa, had said, hey, how about you stop complaining, join the student government, and try to fix those things. And I was a disbeliever in politics at that time. And I'm like, it's not going to matter. She's like, do it. They could use you. No one ever wants to be in student government. Do it. And so I joined the student government. And she was right. They had like 10 openings, so they didn't care who came in. And I joined as a sophomore or as a freshman. And I would say I started on a project. This sounds really petty, but back in 2001, this was a deal that at UMD, if you were trying to figure out what time it was, you literally had to go into a classroom and look at the clock in the room. So if you were running late, like you literally had to be that awkward person who like went into the class and looked in. And so one of the complaints was, let's put some clocks in the hallways. And I remember we made a presentation or a proposal for the administration. And I met with a gentleman named Greg Fox, who was the vice president of finance and operations. And I can't tell you how much time I spent on this proposal. And me and these 4 other students, and we give this like 15-minute presentation, and he stops us halfway through and he goes, you guys just want clocks in the hallway? And we're like, yeah. He's like, just tell me where, I'll put them up. And it happened. And I mean, and it was like this like shock to my system that, wow, maybe the reason sometimes things haven't happened is because people just haven't asked or haven't made a rational discussion about it. And that was this like crazy wake up call to me as a human, where I would say that's when my addiction to politics began, is because I realized that a number of times when people complain about stuff, no one's actually brought it up to the decision makers who can actually change it. And so that's when I really got involved in student government. By my junior year, I was a student body president of UMD. My sophomore year, I was VP of student affairs. I had created this event series called Alt Cold, which was like a homecoming, but in the winter. And that was wildly more successful than homecoming was. I think they still do this Alt Cold series to this day. But I mean, once kind of a little window into today, notice that I created an event series where, I organized a bunch of events. I mean, it's very similar to what I'm doing now. And we promoted it and all that good stuff. And so that we did. We also fought to create the dining system, the financial plans to be different so that the students could have more options of how they chose their dinners. Once again, we brought it forward. They're like, yeah, why wouldn't we do this? And they did, and it was very successful. We lobbied to bring bigger bands to UMD so that, there'd be these large scale concerts at UMD. And our first band, which looking back, this was super lucky. We brought in Black Eyed Peas. And the month after we booked them, they had the song called like Where Is the Love, and then like blew up nationally. But that was the first big show we had, and that was a student-led initiative that Greg Fox again, and at the time Catherine Martin, were willing to support. And in the end, they made out financially on it, and the student body was thrilled to have these bands coming to campus. I mean, those are 3 of the things that we fought for, but as you brought up later, we needed a new hockey rink, and there was a lot of discussion about putting that on campus. And there, honestly, the student opinion at the time was to have it on campus, but a lot of the financials were done, and it didn't make any financial sense for the university to do that. And so there became this community partnership of going back to the DECC and saying, okay, we'd like to still have it at the DECC. And by the way, all these decisions are way above me at the time. I was the student. And when that was all done, Greg Fox then came back to the students and said, we'd love to have your support to get this bill passed. And so in my senior year, me and a small crew of guys and ladies would go down to the Capitol almost every 2 weeks, lobbying different legislators on the importance of building Amsoil Arena. And I remember at the time, like Dan Russell would just kind of make fun of us as a joke, like, you guys are going down more than I am, you know, but looking back on it, we were just like that fan base of just going down and showing that there was support. We were never making any major legislative deals by any means. So just picture us going and saying good things and then going to the next person and saying good things. But that built up this level of support. Eventually the community has a referendum vote on Amsoil Arena. And what a lot of people don't know is that the original logo, the poster, the website, was actually built by my college roommate at the time. Because Dan Russell knew that the cost of building this was too expensive through any of the local agencies, so he had my roommate build the website. And this literally goes all the way back to when I was a senior. And I tell this story, and I say this to all the students here. It's amazing how involved you can be if you just ask. If you just start getting involved, because I'll tell you, as someone right now, like, we all could use the help. And there are a lot of really smart minds in the community, the student community. And it's great to have that diversity of opinion and thoughts, because there are some really good ideas in there. And sometimes we just haven't had, like, I would say in my position now, you just don't hear them. And I think that's what was surprising to me as a student, is you go to folks in leadership and they're just busy doing day to day. And so sometimes it's hard to have that time to think of these out of the box ideas. And students, you guys are thinking about that stuff all the time. And so, like, I advise everyone to get involved in whatever they're passionate about, because as a student, like, you have this moment where you can really, I'm not trying to rip on this, but like, I have kids now. It's so much harder to do things when you have kids. And so when you're a student, believe it or not, it's like every day is a vacation day, I feel like, and just enjoy that moment. And so, like, do the things you're passionate about. And I would say, like, where was I successful was because I just got to the point where I realized that it really wasn't that hard to make really positive change if you were rational and just ask the questions that a normal person would ask. I think far too often in trying to make change, we make up conspiracy theories for why things haven't happened, or we spend way too much time on the proposal before we go and ask why it hasn't happened. And usually just being kind and rational will get you way farther than you would ever envision. And I think that's the other problem, is sometimes we get so wound up of why something has happened that we lobby in anger, and that's not really helpful most of the time. There was I'm kind of moving around a little bit here, but we were trying to build a bike lane in downtown Duluth. And I think that vote, I don't know if it would have changed too much, but the group who was advocating for the bike lane was so intense and so angry that they for sure changed 3 votes on the council against them because of how angry they were. And so, like, it's just a good reminder that if those folks would have just been kind and rational, they probably would have had the votes, and there'd probably be a bike lane there today. Maybe it was close, but it was amazing to me how they straight up just lost people because of that desire that they think that they have to be mad at someone. And so, just going back to my career path, I think a lot of my success is that when I meet with people, I try to treat everyone as equal humans, and that just try to give that respect and that empathy on both sides, no matter what political background they have, no matter whatever their upbringing is, but just trying to treat everyone as equals has been I'd say a success, but I think that's just human life. But like I said, led into the next question. Well, yeah, what leads to success? I think in a lot of ways is just being willing to try and be nice. I know it sounds kind of lame, but it's way more successful than you would realize. I tell that to my kids every day. So skills as a student too, I think being very prepared is helpful. I think it's important to not go too much into this, but I'll give an example. Yesterday, I had 3 of my committees for my board, and I spend a decent amount of time before any committee meeting trying to prepare myself for what questions those board members might have so that I can honestly answer their questions. And I think going into a presentation, going into a test, going into a job interview, trying to think of all of those different elements prior to you getting there is very helpful. And I would always say, try to think of the human psychology. How is that person going to respond to this answer? What do you know of that person that you're interviewing with? How do you know about this person you're taking a test with? Because in social media, we call this the psychodemographics, but the psychodemographics are crucial to how you may succeed at the thing you're trying at. Like I got to know Greg Fox when I was a student, and I got to know that Greg was one of those very classical, if it made sense, he's doing it. And that was a really helpful thing for me to realize. That's not always the case. Sometimes you need to make people more of the center of the result. And so there's different approaches you have to take to get the success. And I think on that note, one of the other little things that's been very useful for me is I don't care if I get the credit. I don't care, for me, it's that end result. If I'm trying to get more funding for the parks, when I was a city councilor, I spent 2 years trying to find a way to get more funding for our Duluth park system. I didn't care whether Don Ness got credit for it. I didn't care if another city councilor got credit for it. What I was happy about is that we secured funding for the parks. And now I'm proud that when I walk around our city parks, I can say, to my kids, hey, look, this park is getting repaired right now because of some work that I did that you're never going to care about. But it's that has been very crucial, especially in politics, because sometimes people really want to get credit. And if you're okay to give that away, you can maybe get this other thing you're fighting for. And that one was a good example. And so I just think that's an important part of that too, is if your goal is and you're passionate about this end result, don't get bent out of shape about whether everyone knows you did it or not. It's because you'll get further on a variety of things if you truly care about the thing you're fighting for. And I think that's true on a management level too. And I would even go farther than say a good leader looks to empower and highlight the cool things that the staff under them are doing. And, I'll say I learned this from Dan Russell. Dan Russell did a phenomenal job of always saying, I'm not doing anything. It's just my staff is really good. And I think that's frankly a good management philosophy of never making people think you're doing it and really making sure you're rewarding the people who are a major part of that engine that's making that work. And Dan did that better than I think anyone I knew of in Duluth. And then when I came in and took the spot, there's some truth to that. Dan did a really good job of hiring some really intelligent, skillful people who do great things. And so it's good to continue to showcase that. And I would go back to Glenn Sheen and say, a lot of my success is because I was super lucky and hired some really intelligent, skillful people who did great work. And I have stolen them now and brought them to the deck. But that's kind of a joke, but also true. But that's part of this too is, finding good people is a huge part to your success. Finding people who have similar passionate cares and making them come along on the ride. One of the, that's a huge part. So, I mean, we just hired someone this last week who has tremendous skills at social media. And I'm excited for Duluth to see what she's going to do to raise the bar for the DECC, which will only help all of Duluth. We hired an event planner this last week who will do something on the event side. We hired, I think this is the one that people will be more excited about in the coming years, but we've hired 2 positions as entertainment curators, so we can bring more big bands to Duluth. We can bring more general entertainment. We're going to start creating our own events, so that this place is going to be hopping once we get all of that organizational foundation made, and we can start putting them here. And I think everyone's going to love that in time. But the people we went and hired were people that are good at what they do, and I'm excited to empower them. So key skills is finding good people who know what they're doing. And sometimes you have to be very persuasive to get them there, but that's part of it, is that they're good at what they do. You're going to have to try to win them over. Advice for students in their careers. Looking at my time. I always recommend this over and over again, but internships. I think everyone has an idea of what they think they want to do. Do an internship to see if you actually want to do that. And I always advise do as many as you can, so that you can, a lot of people think they want to do sales, and then they do 500 calls where they get said no to a lot, and then they realize they don't want to do sales. In the museum world, there's a lot of people who's like, I want to be in collections. It's actually really boring. And so we always try to put those students in collections, and then they'd be like, yeah, we totally don't want to do this. And so I think that's good. I think it's also good to put people and see that this is a passion they want to do, and let them ride with it, and then and push them through that more. And I think that's fun both ways, but man, try it out. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be teaching social studies at one point in my life. And then I realized I don't like kids. And so that was a good reason not to do that. I'm joking. Obviously I have kids now, but it wasn't the thing that I was meant to go with. The other thing too is be proactive when you do graduate on trying to find a job. I think far too often we only do Indeed, or we only do the things that are online. Find employers that you want to work for, whether they have job openings or not, and go to those employers and meet them, get them to know you, and ask questions about whether jobs will be opening. My first job out of college was because I straight up went to the business, asked if they had any job openings coming up. And when they did, they gave me a call and I got the job. So, I mean, I think far too often we do the standard issue process, and then we get the standard issue results. And so I think it's good to just go out there and try to work for the people you want to work for. And that will lead to your happiness as well. So here we get into the fun questions, and I have my 5 minutes left. So how often do you face ethical dilemmas, and how do you deal with them? So often is the answer. And I think that's been the truth since when I was in student government. I think when you get involved in politics, you get some really interesting situations you get stuck in the middle of, and you have to make some real tough ethical decisions. And I think everyone has to figure out like what grounds them into a good decision, and have these moments where you just try to step back as best you can and ask yourself questions that ground you. I think this is a almost safe space for this. It probably isn't, but I'm going to say it. I'm a religious person. And so I will ask myself I will ask the question, like, what will Jesus do in this situation? And when you can find those grounding questions, and whatever religion you're a part of, whatever is your grounding philosophy, that will help you in that decision in some of the most awkward scenarios you get into. And so, are you comfortable describing one of them? I think this is one that all of us as lead managers are dealing with right now. And I would argue it's super messy, which is COVID. If your director and you have the final say on what your COVID policy is going to be at your institution, it is a super terrible decision to make, because if you believe in the science, then you know that these different policies will be in the public health interest. On the other hand, you're potentially going to be really narrowing down the audience who would come to your business. And so you drastically could be putting your employees at risk of health on one hand, but just general employment on the other. So for example, the DECC, during the lockdown, this place shut down and went from nearly 500 employees to 15. And so that was a drastic turn here that has caused a lot of emotional scars with a lot of the past staff and existing staff. And so I think it's easy to look at the public health part, but there's a real mental part on the other side too. And so as a leader in any of these positions, you're making a financial decision, you're making a long-term mental health of your employee decision, and you have an actual pandemic health problem over here. And so how you weigh those decisions is not easy. I mean, if you care about your employees, if you care about your visitors, you're going to take that public health part very seriously. And this is, I would argue, one of the hardest ethical dilemmas that all of us as leaders are dealing with right now. And the higher you get up that chain, the harder that decision is. I don't envy the governor or Mayor Larson right now, who have to make what are awful decisions on behalf of the population. And so I think that's whoever, whether you're president all the way down to a mayor, like that's tough. Like, I'm only doing this for the DECC. I can only imagine the stress and pressure you have the higher you go up that chain. And by the way, whatever decision you make, people are going to hate you. So you are not going to win on anything you decide on that. So that's part of it too. There's sometimes you can thread the needle. This is not one of them. I will tell you personally. So I think that's an ethical challenge that is a real one. I think it feels great right now because Omicron's dropped, but man, you talked to me about a month ago, that's a different feeling on this. So, and there is 1 minute to spare on my 30 minutes of talking. So hopefully this was not too boring for everyone.
Any questions? This was great, Dan, to get to hear your viewpoints. I do have a list of questions from some of my ethics course students who are live on Zoom here, but if anyone else has anything, if you don't mind throwing that into the chat, that would be really helpful. I will start with one that I think is pretty important. How well are you able to manage your personal and work-life balance directing the DECC?
Terribly. No, I mean, I think this is always a struggle for folks in positions. I think we make arrangements with our spouses of trade-offs and different things. And I think that's just what happens when you have families is we try to share. So like my wife has a bowling night every Thursday. And so like, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but there's a lot of major things that I don't do on Thursday night. So I make sure my wife can bowl because she watches the kids on other nights that I'm gone. And so we have these trade-offs. And I'm also thankful that my wife and I got together when she was at University of Minnesota Morris and I was at Duluth. So we kind of started off with a long distance relationship. You want me to start answering the chat questions or?
Sure, I can help you with that too. What internships are you offering or considering at the DECC? That was one of my questions too. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah, so we are just starting this. We are actually working on a wellness internship right now because we have a wellness program here, which I think we have a student already lined up for that one, but that one's definitely the one that's happened in the past too. I think down the road, marketing internships will probably be a thing here. I think you'll have a operationals internships. We do so many odd different things here, from public relations to we have engineers to sports marketing to sports operations. I mean, there's so much variety down the path here. But yeah, I'd say if folks are interested, feel free to email me and we'll see what we got. Thanks for the question, Carrie. So it's funny, I clearly know some of the folks here, so. I'll take Ryan's question. Can you talk about how you understand the environmental impact of the deck and how you can show sustainability leadership in our community? I think it's a great question. This is something that we try to tackle at Glensheen, but it was at such a smaller scale. But I'm glad we did, because it really got me ready for this role now. Before I took this job, because I'm kind of a nerd on a variety of levels, I used to, when I go on these business trips, I would go to these different convention centers, and sometimes I'd meet with their staff just to get ideas. And I went to Vancouver once, and of all the places I've been to, they've probably done the best job of a convention center understanding their environmental impact. And so there's a lot of things that I've been trying to eventually get to on their end, but they worked with a variety of local partners so that they were mindful of so many different things on their environmental side. It wasn't just what type of cups they were using. They are just like us in that they're immediately adjacent to their harbor. And so they were doing environmental studies with several environmental groups to see how much wastewater from their facility was going into the harbor. They were just checking on the general health of the harbor. And they took a more proactive approach of saying, like, even though we're not the one destroying the harbor, we're going to help you clean it up. And so, like, they were very active citizens in that regard. And they have this great story that before they started their harbor cleanup, you never saw killer whales in their harbor. And now you saw killer whales coming back into their harbor. Hopefully we don't have that happen here for a variety of reasons. But it was just kind of a cool story. So what are we trying to do today? So here's some small things we're working on in the moment. We are trying to hook up monitors to all of our electrical across our grid so that we can really truly know where our electrical expenses are coming from, and then in time try to reduce that energy consumption cost. And so, I mean, long-term, that might be solar, that might be, you know, a variety of changes to that. But that's a small one. Another one is, and this, I'm not trying to make fun of the bottle things, but this is a big deal for us. Every Bulldog hockey game we've had in the past, if you can picture this, we went through so many water bottles every single game that just the water alone would cover the sheet of ice in plastic. And so when you can visualize that, that's not a great environmental thing. And so we made the very unpopular decision this fall to switch from plastic to aluminum cans, which are infinitely recyclable. And we've definitely had some fan experience not loving the aluminum cans. But I will say environmentally, it is the right decision to make. And once you visualize that sheet of ice covered in plastic every game, you feel like it's the right decision. And I think that's a small way we're going forward, but I'm proud that we are the first arena in Minnesota to go all aluminum. And so that's, I think, a step in the right direction. And I will also say how you market that is interesting too. If you've been to any of our games, you'll notice that we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that because our audience is generally not an audience that wants to hear that. And so sometimes when we proactively engage in something that may have a political bend to it, the other political bend will tear into you for doing that. And so sometimes it's not really in our interest to brag about the stuff that we're doing, just do it for the right reasons. I think that was a lesson I learned from Don Ness. I think he was the king of that he would do some really great progressive thing and never tell anyone about it. and then people won't even know what happened. And then it happened, and the city got better because of it. And so that was one of his moves, and I've definitely taken that angle from him as well. Once again, do the right thing and don't think like you need to get credit for it. Great question, Tom. So I think this is a great question in a variety of levels right now, because the community right now is debating, I would say, it's branding. I think we're all talking about how we brand the community, but I think what my response to this question is going to be the same response I hear from every transplant I know is Duluth is that mix of urban meets nature. And we love that it has that combination together. You know, I just came back from Minneapolis last night, and I don't want to live there, and I don't want to live in Crosby. And so, like, this is like that great combination of those things. There's a gentleman I met this weekend, actually Rick was with me, and this gentleman works for the insurance company that oversees the Super Bowl last weekend. And he chose to live here in Duluth because of that nature meets urban. And I think more and more of that is going to be more popular with people as time progresses. And I think we are in that sweet spot if we can figure out how to brand that a little bit better. So yeah, that's why I'm here. Bruce, do you have mentors and how do you find them? I treat this kind of like I treated looking for jobs. Find people that inspire you and go out and meet them. And then ask them a lot of questions, you know, whether you realize it or not. I think Don was one of my mentors at one point. I think Roger was one of my mentors. Roger Reinert was one of my mentors at one point. I think as of late, there's a variety of different leadership in Duluth that I ask a lot of questions to. Dan Russell, I mean, the guy did a lot here. I mean, and more than people realize. And so lately I've been definitely asking him a lot of questions because there's always a reason why something happened usually. And I think it's good to go and ask the past of why that happened. And so I would try to say, I don't have one mentor. I have probably a lot, because I just think it's important to see why things happen in the first place. I think this is my history background, but I've learned again and again and again that there's usually really great thoughts into why something was built or done. You know, like a lot of the successful things I did at Glensheen were not because I came up with an original idea, but because I went and looked at the past and then recreated something from the past. And I'd say we're doing that right now with the DECC. So one of the things we're working on is we're going to be redoing Symphony Hall, and we're actually going to make Symphony Hall back to what it looked like in 1966, where it's this beautiful mid-century modern space. So you're going to see that mid-century modern furniture throughout the lobby, throughout the mezzanine, and it's going to have, you know, this cool new vibe that it didn't have before. Now, I'm super lucky because mid-century modern is on trend right now, but that's going to change the look and feel of that space. And that's really us looking back at those old pictures from 1966 and saying, oh, that's what the architect was thinking. Let's do it. So, yeah, I'll let you take the next question. Melissa, I'm kind of spitballing here now.
Yeah. So what keystone habits do you think have made you the leader you are? Were there any intentional habits, or did they come naturally to you?
I think because I have 4 children, I think some of this is probably genetics from my parents, because I'm watching my kids watch that happen. But yeah, a lot of it's forms that you do over time. When you're in events, when you're an event planner, you learn the skill of adaptability really quick. And I think that's probably when one of my other useful habits is that I'm willing to adapt quickly and not take things too personal to find a way to make it work. I think we get so anxious to get upset about things sometimes. You just got to move on, move past it, and figure out what the next thing is. And I 100% believe that you learn through failure more than anything else. And so don't be ever scared to do that, because that's where you're going to learn the most. Just don't do it again.
Good advice. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. I have a few more from students. Have your views on ethics changed over the course of your career?
That's a good question. I would say my general core philosophy has not. And I think that's, once again, back to those grounding principles. That's been pretty solid. And if I struggle with something, it's because I'm breaking that basic core philosophy. And so like, that's why I do believe it's good to figure out what that is for you personally, and you know what it is. And it's probably not something that's even going to leave you easily. It's just something that's in your core. Sorry, that's not probably the great answer, but yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. So you alluded to this and talked a little bit about the COVID situation, which has been a bummer for all of us, right? But a question here kind of correlates with that. When you are faced with conflict in the workplace, how do you try to keep your team motivated and positive? So how are you trying to help them through those kind of situations?
Yeah. I think it's important to always look on the horizon and try to get your team to see the horizon, because it's so easy to get bogged down into whatever disaster is immediately in front of you or even a month in front of you, and to try to look at that longer view. Because if you don't, it's really easy to just get stuck in that mud. And I would also say, if you're stuck in the mud and you can't get out of it, try to find something in the immediacy that's a success and just be like, look, there's something, happy over here. Because it's, once you go on that negative train, it's hard to get off of that. And so, like, especially as a team, like toxic employees are really tough, because it's just hard to unwind that negativity. And so, like, being positive is crucial, but I would say don't be fake positive. Find true things that are really successful, because any team can see the stuff that's fake. Be honest about it.
Thank you. Rick has a question for you in the chat. We encourage our students to be lifelong learners. What does that look like for you since you graduated, and how have you continued to develop yourself?
Yeah, great question, Rick. You're biased, about this, me. I read a ton. So I highly advise people to read. I mean, yeah, I'm in a group of guys that hang out, and half of what we do is talk about the books that we've been reading. I subscribe, this is really nerdy, but I get the New York Times every single day delivered to my house, and I go through the whole thing almost every single day. And I think that keeps me very engaged, but not on necessarily the news, honestly. Like, I love the food section. I love the other parts of the paper that I think are engaging the different parts of my brain. The art section is great too. And I think it's important to read things that aren't always necessarily your passions, and to just kind of re-engage those different portions and keep them alive. I love TED Talks. I love all of that type of stuff. Yeah, I'm probably an obsessive learner is probably a phrase, because I love learning all these things. We went to a Timberwolves game last night with me, a board member, and a staff member. And the only reason we went there was to see what could we learn from the customer experience side of what the Timberwolves handle people, from how they have the app to how they have emails after the game, to how do the concession stands look, how do the employees treat you at the concession stands, how do they treat you at the ticket offering, what does the room smell like, what does the branding look like, what are the visuals? I mean, like, there's an endless list of questions we went through last night. And after it was done, the board member who was with us this morning, he goes, oh, he works in hospitals, and he's like, I'm not going to be able to walk into a clinic again the same way. Like, now I'm going to be looking at all the chairs, I'm going to be looking at the stuff. And that's like, once you get into that life, like, crazy learning world, you can't get out of it, because you just get excited to see how you can make it better. And it is a fun thing. And I love them in a new role that I have a whole bunch of new stuff to learn, which has been honestly a very fun and exciting thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that. A few more questions popping up in the chat. Is there anything you would do differently, professionally speaking, if you could go back in time?
Yes. I would for sure do a study abroad trip when I was in college. I think that was my biggest regrets, is I didn't take a year off in between and go to Europe, go to Japan, go in debt, do it. Because, like, you're never going to have that time again. And yeah, that's by far my biggest regret. And I know at the time, I mean, I was a student body president of UMD. I had a full-time job. We had to go to school all the time. I had all that going on at the same time. I'll tell you, that is still less than me having 4 kids. And so, like, every day of that time was a vacation day, and I cannot stress that point enough. So, like, if you can sleep in on a weekend, you're in a vacation mode. So, like, just go enjoy those things, whether they're in Europe or whether they're in Crosby. Go and, like, experience that world while you have that time. I think that's definitely one of my regrets, is I didn't do more of that. Because you won't have, and not until my kids are out of the house and I'm retired will I have that opportunity again. And not trying to rip on my family heritage, but we're not the healthiest bunch in our 60s. And so, I'm not going to be able to do what I wanted to do in my 20s. So just go and do that now. So that would be a big push of mine.
Okay, I see one more that's a little lengthy here, but we'll work through it. How have your talents in event planning and leadership complemented each other and blended together throughout your career? Do you ever feel yourself being pulled away from one because of the other? Great question.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because I think the more you get into leadership roles, you get less into the event planning side. But if you do a lot of event planning, you enjoy it. It's in its own little, addiction. And so it's hard to sometimes watch a team from afar. I'm in the early stages here at the DECC where I'm heavily involved in helping manage and getting things moving in the right direction. But in my 8th and 7th year at Glensheen, I had built the team. The team was rocking. It was like clockwork. And I was at that point where I'm watching from afar. And don't get me wrong, I was proud to see it working so well. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, because like you miss those event planning moments. I think as you get a team to a super high level of function, you're naturally going to get further and further away from the event planning side. And so it's an interesting thing to watch. On the other hand, I'm also proud when I get far enough away, because that means things are working really well. And I think that's always going to be a thing to watch and be careful of. But that's a very good question.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience at this time? Sandy, it looks like you're talking. I'm going to try to unmute you. Let's see. Are you able to unmute? Sandy, it won't let me unmute you. Ryan has something that he wrote in the chat. What are you most excited about for this year?
Probably too many things, but I would say right now we have this entertainment staff coming, and I am extremely excited to start bringing more bands, more entertainment, and I think Duluth is going to enjoy that too. But I think we're going to be creating some new events. We're going to make a cider festival in the fall. We're working on some other kind of music festivals, and I'm pumped for, because I think that's going to be a great thing for local hotels and restaurants. It's going to be a great thing for Duluth in general, and it's just going to be fun. But yeah, for people who are event planners, man, when an event goes well, like it's a joy. It's a lot of fun. Like when you can sit back and watch this thing just rocking. We kind of redid the Winter Village event that we had at Glensheen at the DECC this year. And on its first day, it had 20,000 visitors. And like to sit there and watch this mass of people just enjoy this event that you're a part of, it's a pretty awesome experience. And for me, the big joy I had this year is it was always at Glensheen. And so we didn't have the immediate, I'd say, secondary benefits, where this year I walked over to Canal, and during the day at Winter Village, Canal was rocking. And the Canal businesses are like, thank you so much for doing this. Like, you have made this look like a summer day in the middle of the winter. We couldn't appreciate this more. And like, that makes every event planner happy. That was just awesome to see those secondary benefits. Great question, Rick. It's my biased answer of the bands. So this is something I think everyone should know, and this is a struggle for me, is our largest venue, which is Bayfront, can only fit 10,000 people. Amsoil is 9,100. DECC Arena is around in the mid 88s. So like the band that I would love to see, it'd be like Radiohead, which is the poster behind me. We will never see them until I'm probably in retirement age, because they are just way, way too big still. But yeah, I would love to see Radiohead. I'd love to see Pearl Jam. I think those would be two great shows. But like, I think what I'm working on now are some of these bands that are not quite that big. So like a Modest Mouse to a Weezer, some of those bands that we can actually still get into this environment, I think would be very cool.
I'll go to Weezer. Well, and Modest Mouse too. So
Yeah, see?
fun. I love going to concerts at the DECC, or at Amsoil Arena, I should say.
I prefer to call it the DECC.
Both, right. And the Winter Village is my absolute favorite event. So thank you for that. Keep that going.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything they want to ask?
Dan, thank you. This was awesome. There's so many learning moments that you covered a lot of ground over the last 52 minutes. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for the leading questions. Thanks for the ask. This is fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate your time. If we don't have anything else from the listeners, we'll sign off. We'll stop recording. Thank you so much.